She was abandoned at the altar, called not enough in front of hundreds. But just as her world shattered, a powerful stranger burst through the church doors and changed everything with one shocking word: daughter. What unfolded next was a whirlwind of secrets, betrayal, and a billionaire father she never knew existed. Who was really behind her heartbreak, and how far would they go to silence her? This is Isabella Carter's journey. From rejection to revelation, from prey to power. You won't believe how it ends. Where are you watching from? Tell us in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more incredible African stories. The church was breathtaking, towering ceilings, stained glass windows casting a kaleidoscope of color across white rose petals scattered along the aisle. Every seat was filled with guests dressed in designer suits and elegant gowns, murmuring with excitement. But at the front, Isabella Carter stood frozen in place, her fingers trembling around the bouquet she had arranged herself the night before to save on costs. She wore a delicate lace dress bought from a vintage boutique, carefully altered over months to fit just right. It wasn't couture, but it was hers. Across from her, Liam Westbrook, her fiancé, her best friend, the man she thought loved her beyond appearances, wasn't smiling. He hadn't smiled since she walked down the aisle. And now, just as the minister asked the crowd to speak or forever hold their peace, Liam shifted his weight and spoke instead. "I can't do this," he said, his voice sharp and clear. "You're not enough." This was a mistake. Gasps rippled through the cathedral. Isabella's breath caught as if the words had smacked the air from her lungs. For a moment the room spun. She blinked rapidly, trying to understand what had just happened. "What?" she whispered, barely audible. Liam turned fully toward her, jaw tight, eyes colder than she'd ever seen. "Let's be honest. You come from nothing. We're from different worlds. I thought I could overlook that, but I can't. I need someone who fits my life, my future. You'll always be limited." The bouquet fell from Isabella's hands as her arms dropped to her sides. She felt like she was standing outside her own body, watching a nightmare unfold in slow motion. Some guests had already begun to rise, shifting uncomfortably. Others stared at her with pity, their expressions a blur through the tears rising in her eyes. From the front pew, Liam's mother, Claudia Westbrook, gave a small approving nod, as if her son had finally come to his senses. Isabella could barely move, her mind scrambling to find some thread of reality to hold on to. Her mother, Grace, let out a strangled sound from the pew behind her, and her stepfather, Michael, started to rise. But everything stilled when the great oak doors at the back of the church suddenly burst open with a thunderous creak. Heads turned. A tall man with salt and pepper hair, dressed in a flawless charcoal suit, walked confidently down the aisle. Two men in black followed him closely, their earpieces glinting in the light. The stranger stopped halfway to the altar, his eyes fixed on Isabella. There was something strikingly familiar in the way he held himself, the way his blue eyes searched her face. "Hello, daughter," the man said, his voice calm but commanding. "It seems I'm just in time." A stunned hush fell over the room. Liam froze. His mother's mouth dropped open. Whispers began rippling across the church like wildfire. "Isabella." Grace's voice trembled behind her. Isabella turned slowly to the man, heart pounding. "What did you say?" "I'm Ethan Blackwell," he said, taking another step forward. "I'm your father." The name hit the room like lightning. Ethan Blackwell, the billionaire tech mogul, recluse, one of the most powerful men in the country, and he was claiming her. Isabella Carter, the same woman who had just been left at the altar for being not enough. Liam stumbled back a step, his expression turning ashen. Isabella didn't move, couldn't speak. Her entire world, already shattered, had just cracked open again in a way she never could have imagined. One second, she was the poor teacher who'd been humiliated in front of everyone. The next, she was the long-lost daughter of a man who could buy this church and every person in it 10 times over. As the whispers swelled in chaos, Ethan Blackwell reached out his hand to her. "I've been looking for you for a very long time." The hours that followed were a blur for Isabella. She didn't remember how she got out of the church, only that one moment she was staring at the outstretched hand of a stranger claiming to be her father, and the next, she was in the back seat of a sleek black car, her wedding dress crumpled around her legs, her fingers tangled in her lap. Ethan Blackwell sat beside her, silent for most of the drive, watching her with a quiet intensity. Outside, the city blurred past in streaks of motion. Inside, Isabella felt frozen in time. Her mother and stepfather followed in a separate car. No one had said much, not since the bombshell Ethan dropped had left everyone reeling. The silence between them was heavy, but Isabella couldn't find the words to break it. Her mind kept looping. "You're not enough. This was a mistake." And then, "Hello, daughter." They arrived at a luxury penthouse overlooking Central Park, the kind of place Isabella had only ever seen in glossy magazines. Glass walls, polished marble floors, curated artwork. It didn't feel like a home. It felt like a curated life. Ethan led her to a private study filled with books and old photographs. When he offered her a chair, she sat, still dazed, still clutching the pearls around her neck, her high school graduation gift from her mom. One of the few things that had always made her feel special. "I imagine you have a lot of questions," Ethan said at last, his voice calm but careful, like he was trying not to startle a wild animal. "And I'll answer every one of them. But first, just know this. I didn't abandon you. I never stopped looking." Isabella looked up slowly. "You're really him," she said, her voice hoarse. "Ethan Blackwell." He smiled gently. "That's what the world knows me as. But to you, I hope I can be something more, eventually." She stared at him, trying to find a piece of herself in his face. The curve of his jaw, the eyes, blue like hers. It was surreal. "My mom told me you left us, that you didn't want us." "I never wanted that," Ethan said quietly. "Your mother and I, we were young. I was building my company, obsessed with work. She begged me to slow down, to be present. I kept promising I would, and I kept failing. Then one day she was just gone." "She changed our names," Isabella murmured, more to herself than to him. "I never even knew what you looked like." "She was trying to protect you," Ethan said. "From what she saw as a future filled with neglect. I can't say she was wrong to worry." Isabella's chest ached. Everything she thought she knew about her past was unraveling. "So why now? Why show up at my wedding of all places?" Ethan's eyes softened. 3 days ago, my private investigator found a newspaper clipping. You were in it, posing with your kindergarten class after winning a grant for a school garden. That smile? I knew. I flew back from Singapore immediately. I didn't know what would happen at the wedding. I just knew I had to be there, to see you, to finally say, "I'm your father." Tears welled in her eyes again, but this time they weren't just from grief. They were from 25 years of questions, finally beginning to find answers. "I should have been told," she whispered. "You should have," Ethan agreed, his voice low with regret. "And I'm sorry for every moment I missed. Every birthday, every scraped knee, every school play. I can't get those years back, Isabella. But if you let me, I'd like to be in your life now. No expectations. Just a second chance." She looked at him through blurred vision, torn between heartbreak and hope. Outside the window, the city stretched endlessly below her. Inside this room, her life had just changed forever. "I don't know what to do with any of this," she said quietly. "Then let's figure it out together," Ethan replied. One step at a time. The days that followed were a tangle of emotions for Isabella. Grief, confusion, and a cautious sense of wonder she didn't know what to do with. She spent hours talking with her mother, trying to piece together the missing years. Grace admitted everything: the fights with Ethan, the loneliness, the fear that Isabella would grow up knowing a father who loved his empire more than his family. She hadn't meant to keep Ethan away forever, she claimed. It had just become harder and harder to reverse course as the years passed. By the time Isabella was old enough to ask questions, the lie had already settled like dust. Ethan, for his part, didn't push. He gave Isabella space, even as he gently reached out, inviting her to dinner, sending her flowers to her apartment with handwritten notes that said things like, "No expectations, just curiosity," and "You're not alone anymore." He seemed determined to earn a place in her life not through money, but through presence, something Isabella found both disarming and deeply moving. Still, the noise around her refused to quiet. The media had somehow picked up the story: Ethan Blackwell's long-lost daughter discovered at the altar, and reporters began calling her school, her apartment, even her mother's house. Isabella had to unplug her phone just to sleep. And then there was Liam. He showed up 3 days after the wedding, standing outside her classroom with a massive bouquet of white orchids and that same practiced charm she once found irresistible. "Isabella, please," he'd said, eyes shining with manufactured regret. "What happened was a mistake. I panicked. It had nothing to do with your background. I was overwhelmed." But she had seen his face at the altar. That wasn't panic. That was calculation. And now, knowing who she truly was, he was scrambling to undo what he'd broken. She refused to see him that day, or the next, even when he sent gifts, jewelry, apology letters, even a sleek watch with an engraving, for our second beginning. As if money could buy back the damage. And yet, something still didn't sit right. The timing of everything, Liam's insistence, the way his words had felt, rehearsed. Then there was the sudden appearance of another man, Julian Crane, tall, poised, with silver-flecked hair and an unsettlingly calm smile. He introduced himself as Ethan's executive vice president, said he'd worked with him for over a decade. At first glance, he was nothing but polite, but Isabella couldn't shake the feeling that he was assessing her, weighing her like a variable. "You've certainly made an impression," he'd told her at one of Ethan's small private dinners. "Alexander speaks of you constantly. It's quite the story, reuniting after all these years. Some would say, fate." The way he said it made her skin crawl. Later that evening, she asked Ethan about Julian. "He's loyal," her father had said, though with a subtle weariness in his voice. "He's helped build Blackwell Technologies into what it is today. I owe him a lot. But loyalty in the corporate world is complicated." Isabella pressed further. "Was he part of your succession plan?" Ethan hesitated before nodding. "Until recently, yes. He was meant to take over if anything happened to me, but things change." She didn't ask what he meant, but she didn't have to. She was the change. The next morning, Isabella met her best friend Maya at their usual coffee shop. Maya had always been her anchor, the one person who told it like it was. "I've got a weird feeling," Isabella confessed, stirring her latte. "About Liam, about Julian, about how quickly everything's shifting." "You think they're connected?" Maya asked, brow furrowing. "I don't know," Isabella said, "but I think I need to find out." And just like that, the story shifted. Isabella Carter was no longer just a teacher trying to make sense of a long-lost father. She was a woman stepping into a world of power, secrets, and perhaps betrayal. The decision to investigate wasn't born from paranoia. It was instinct. Something about the way Liam and Julian kept reappearing in her life, circling her like predators in expensive suits, didn't feel like coincidence. Isabella couldn't prove anything, not yet, but the sudden warmth from people who once barely acknowledged her, the board members treating her like royalty, the tension in Julian's smile, it all added up to a question she couldn't ignore. Who was playing whom? With Maya's help, Isabella began pulling at threads. Late one night, they sat hunched over Maya's laptop, scrolling through social media archives, corporate profiles, and conference photos. "There," Maya whispered, freezing the screen. "A photo from a tech summit 2 years ago. Julian Crane on a panel about corporate futures, seated beside none other than Liam Westbrook. Both men were smiling, shaking hands like old allies. They knew each other," Isabella breathed. "Before I even met Liam." "That means Liam didn't just panic at the altar," Maya said. "He was planted. This was planned." Digging deeper, they found more. Investment documents tied to Meridian Capital, the firm funding Liam's real estate developments, had indirect connections to a venture fund chaired by Julian. The overlap wasn't obvious, but to someone who knew where to look, it was glaring. By the time the sun began to rise, Isabella sat back, heart pounding, staring at the ugly truth. Liam had been introduced into her life for a reason. Julian had been trying to protect his claim to Ethan's empire, and if there was even a chance Ethan might rewrite the succession plan to include her, she had to be removed, or at the very least, controlled. The next day, Isabella brought what they'd found to Ethan. In his penthouse study, she laid out the photos, the records, the emails she and Maya had uncovered. Ethan listened in grim silence, his expression tightening with each new revelation. When she was finished, he didn't speak for a long time. "I always knew Julian was ambitious," he said at last, "but I never thought he'd go this far." "He wasn't just ambitious," Isabella said. "He was desperate." Ethan exhaled, then stood. "If they were working together, we can't confront them head on, They'll deny it, twist the narrative. We need to expose them publicly in a way no one can ignore. You're thinking, another wedding? She said, half joking, but Ethan didn't laugh. Actually, yes. Her eyes widened. You're not serious. I am, he said. If Liam thinks he's back in your good graces, he'll show up. And if Julian is still trying to secure his place, he'll be close behind. We bring them both into the same room, invite board members, press, allies. Then we show them what you found. Let the world see who they really are. Isabella hesitated. The thought of pretending to take Liam back made her stomach churn. But the idea of taking control of the story, of her life, it lit something inside her. I'd need to be convincing, she said. They'd have to believe I'm really falling for it. Ethan met her eyes. Can you do that? She thought of the look on Liam's face when he left her at the altar. The icy dismissal. The way Julian's voice slithered beneath every compliment. She straightened her shoulders. Yes, she said. Let's give them the performance of a lifetime. Over the next 2 weeks, Isabella played her role perfectly. She returned Liam's calls with soft hesitation, allowed herself to be seen in public with him again, made comments about second chances to people she knew would report back to Julian. Every move was calculated, every word deliberate. When Liam finally suggested they elope, Isabella sighed dramatically and said, Actually, I was thinking something more. Elegant, just family, a few friends, somewhere beautiful. My father would love to attend. Liam hesitated, just for a second. Then he smiled, eyes gleaming with false warmth. Of course, he said, whatever makes you happy. But it wouldn't be happiness waiting for him at the altar this time. It would be the truth. The morning of the second wedding dawned crisp and clear, the Manhattan skyline glittering with promise. Isabella stood in the penthouse suite of the St. Regis Hotel, wrapped in a gown that shimmered like sunlight on water. It was nothing like the modest lace dress she had worn weeks earlier. It was bold, sophisticated, custom-made. A gift from Ethan. But more than that, it was armor. She wasn't walking to the altar this time as a hopeful bride. She was walking in as a woman who knew exactly what she was doing. Maya fastened the final clasp on her back. Are you ready to break the internet? Isabella met her best friend's reflection in the mirror. I'm ready to break the lie. Downstairs, the rooftop garden had been transformed into an elegant, intimate venue. White roses, soft candlelight, a string quartet playing something gentle and classical. But beneath the perfection pulsed a different kind of energy, anticipation. Guests included top executives, members of the board, legal advisors, and select media figures who'd been told this was a private celebration of Ethan's daughter's engagement. None knew what was about to unfold. Liam stood at the altar in a sharp tuxedo, his smile fixed, his confidence on full display. Beside him, Julian Crane wore his signature composed expression, but the tightness around his eyes betrayed tension. He didn't like surprises, and this second wedding was a surprise he couldn't fully control. The music swelled as Isabella appeared, flanked not by a stepfather but by Ethan himself. He offered her his arm, and she took it with silent strength. The crowd rose. Phones clicked discreetly. This was the image they'd all been waiting for. The billionaire's lost daughter, restored to wealth and power, marrying the man who had supposedly broken her heart. But as she walked down the aisle, Isabella felt none of the nerves she'd had before. Only clarity. When they reached the altar, Liam took her hand, beaming. You look amazing, he whispered, like a real Blackwell. She didn't smile. The officiant began his welcome, the opening lines of the ceremony echoing in the rooftop air. Then, right on cue, he spoke the words Isabella had been waiting for. If anyone here can show just cause why these two should not be lawfully joined, speak now or forever hold their peace. Isabella stepped back from Liam and turned to the audience. Actually, she said, her voice calm and clear, I do have something to say. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Liam's smile faltered. Julian's jaw visibly tensed. I'd like to thank you all for coming today, Isabella continued. Not to witness a wedding, but to witness the truth. A large monitor hidden beneath the floral arch came to life. On it appeared a slideshow. Emails between Liam and Julian, investment connections, surveillance photos, even a copy of a drafted post-nuptial agreement that would have handed control of any inheritance she received directly to Liam. This man, she gestured toward Liam, was never interested in love. He was a plant, hired by Julian Crane to manipulate and marry me before I could reconnect with my father. Their goal was simple: keep me away from my inheritance and keep Julian at the top of Blackwell Enterprises. The crowd erupted in whispers. Julian stood abruptly. "This is absurd, fabricated." "I don't think so," said Ethan, stepping forward as Eleanor, his chief of staff, produced signed documents and witness affidavits. "We have everything we need for a criminal investigation." Security moved in. Julian was intercepted. Liam turned to Isabella, panicked now. "I didn't know. I didn't mean to hurt you." "But you did," she said, stepping away from him. "You lied. You betrayed. You underestimated me." He reached for her, but security blocked him. As they escorted both men out, Isabella turned back to the guests. "I may have walked into this garden in a wedding dress, but I won't be leaving as someone's bride. I'm leaving as myself. Finally whole." The applause began quietly, then swelled. Ethan pulled her into a proud embrace. The truth was out. The trap had been sprung, and the future, her future, was finally hers to write. Sometimes, the most painful moments in life are the ones that set us free. Isabella Carter was humiliated, heartbroken, and betrayed, publicly abandoned by the man she thought she loved. But that very heartbreak became the turning point that led her to discover her true identity, her strength, and her voice. This story reminds us that our worth is never defined by someone else's opinion or by the number in a bank account. True value lies in integrity, courage, and the ability to rise even when everything tries to break you. Isabella didn't just expose lies. She reclaimed her story. She chose not to become bitter, but better. Instead of letting betrayal define her, she used it to uncover the truth and protect the future. In a world where appearances often matter more than character, she stood firm in who she was, and in doing so, she showed that dignity and authenticity are more powerful than any inheritance. No matter where you come from, or how others try to define you, never forget this: your story belongs to you. And sometimes, the moment you stop chasing validation is the moment you become unstoppable. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more powerful African stories that inspire, uplift, and remind you of your worth.